The morning light spilled through the kitchen window as Eleanor Jenkins watered her row of potted herbs on the windowsill. At 78 years old, she moved with the careful deliberation that comes with age, but her blue eyes remained sharp and attentive. The modest two-bedroom house in Pine Grove, Ohio, had been her home for over 50 years, and though it felt emptier since her husband Thomas passed away 3 years ago, she'd settled into a comfortable routine. Eleanor ran her fingers gently across the basil leaves and smiled at their sweet scent. Small pleasures like this had become the anchors of her days. She glanced at the clock, almost 9. Time for her morning tea and then off to the library where she volunteered 3 days a week. The kettle whistled just as the phone rang. Eleanor turned off the stove and reached for the cordless phone on the counter. "Grandma, it's me," came the excited voice of her granddaughter. "Good morning, sweetheart," Eleanor replied, her voice warming at the sound of her favorite person in the world. "Aren't you supposed to be in class right now? It's study period. Listen, I need a huge favor." The teenager's voice had that particular tone that Eleanor recognized, the one that meant she wanted something important. "What kind of favor?" Eleanor asked, pouring hot water over her tea bag, the steam rising in gentle curls. "There's this open mic night at the Copper Cup Cafe tomorrow. I signed up to sing, but now I'm freaking out. I need you there for support," Eleanor sighed. "Honey, you know I don't go out much in the evenings anymore. Please, Grandma? Dad has that business dinner he can't get out of, and Mom's still out of town at that conference. You're the only one who can come." There was a slight tremor in her granddaughter's voice that tugged at Eleanor's heart. She thought of the girl's mother, Eleanor's daughter-in-law, who had always encouraged the child's artistic pursuits. Unlike Eleanor's own parents, who had firmly believed that music was a hobby, not a career path. "All right," Eleanor conceded, already mentally rearranging her quiet evening plans of reading and perhaps watching that British mystery show she enjoyed. "What time should I be there?"
7 o'clock.
Thank you. You're the best." The relief in her granddaughter's voice was palpable. "I have to go. Bell's about to ring." "Love you, Grandma." "Love you too," Eleanor replied, but the girl had already hung up. Setting her tea on the small kitchen table, Eleanor glanced at the closed door across the hallway. Behind it sat her old upright piano, largely untouched since Thomas died. She hadn't played much in recent years, except occasionally when her granddaughter visited and begged to hear the old songs. Teaching piano to neighborhood children had been Eleanor's job for decades, but she rarely played for pleasure anymore. The library was quieter than usual that day. Eleanor shelved books and helped a few patrons find what they needed, her mind occasionally drifting to tomorrow evening. She hadn't been to the Copper Cup before, though she knew it was popular with the younger crowd. The thought of sitting alone among strangers made her slightly uneasy, but she pushed the feeling aside. Some things were worth a little discomfort. That evening, after a simple dinner of soup and toast, Eleanor found herself drawn to the piano room. She hesitated at the door, her hand resting on the knob. With a deep breath, she turned it and stepped inside. Dust motes danced in the beam of light from the hallway. The room smelled of old books and the lemon polish she still applied to the piano once a month, even though no one played it. She switched on the lamp and sat on the bench, running her fingers lightly over the keys without pressing them. The piano had been a splurge when they bought it 30 years ago. Thomas had worked extra shifts at the factory for months to afford it, insisting that a piano teacher should have a proper instrument at home. She remembered how proud he'd been when it was delivered, how he'd stood back watching her face as she played it for the first time. Almost without thinking, Eleanor began to play. Just scales at first, her fingers remembering the patterns they'd traced thousands of times. Then she transitioned into a simple Bach piece she had taught countless beginners. Her hands felt stiff, the joints not as flexible as they once were, but the muscle memory remained intact. When she finished the Bach, she paused, then began playing something different, a melody she had composed herself many years ago. She had dozens of these tucked away in a folder in the bench, pieces she'd written throughout her life but rarely shared. This particular one had come to her after a summer afternoon, when Thomas had surprised her with a picnic by the lake on their 20th anniversary. She'd never given the composition a name, but in her mind she called it Golden Hour for the way the sunlight had looked on the water that day. As she played, her body relaxed, and for a brief moment, it felt like Thomas was there in the room with her, smiling in that quiet way of his. When the last note faded, Eleanor sat still, her hands resting in her lap. The house felt different somehow, not quite as empty. With a small smile, she closed the piano and returned to the kitchen to finish her evening routine. The next day crawled by. Eleanor found herself checking the clock repeatedly as she went about her usual Wednesday activities. A morning walk around the neighborhood, a bit of grocery shopping, lunch with her friend Harriet from church. By late afternoon, she was standing before her closet, wondering what one wore to an open mic night at a cafe. She settled on a pair of navy slacks and a light blue blouse that her daughter-in-law had given her for Christmas. A simple pearl necklace, Thomas's gift on their 25th anniversary, completed the outfit. Eleanor studied her reflection in the mirror. The face looking back at her showed every one of her 78 years. The creases around her eyes, the softness beneath her chin, the silver hair she kept in a neat bob. She applied a touch of lipstick, then nodded at herself. It would do. The Copper Cup Cafe was located on Main Street, a 15-minute walk from Eleanor's house. Though she still drove for errands, she preferred walking when the weather permitted. The early evening air was pleasant, with just a hint of the autumn chill that would soon settle over the town. The cafe looked different than Eleanor had imagined, less trendy and more cozy, with warm wooden tables and soft lighting. A small stage had been set up at the far end with a microphone stand and a stool. About half the tables were already occupied when she arrived, mostly by younger people, though she spotted a few faces closer to her own age. Eleanor had just found a small table near the middle of the room when her granddaughter rushed over, her face flushed with excitement and nerves. "Grandma, you came," she exclaimed, hugging Eleanor tightly. "Of course I did. I said I would," Eleanor replied, patting the girl's back. "When are you performing?" "I'm 5th on the list. There are 12 acts total." She fidgeted with the sleeve of her sweater. "I'm so nervous. What if I forget the words? What if my voice cracks?" Eleanor took her granddaughter's hands in hers. "Take a deep breath," she instructed. "Remember what I taught you about stage fright when you had your first piano recital?" The teenager nodded. "Imagine the audience in their pajamas," Eleanor chuckled. "Well, yes, that too. But more importantly, focus on the music, not on who's listening. The music is what matters." A young man approached the microphone and welcomed everyone to the open mic night. The first performer was a college-aged boy who played guitar and sang a popular folk song. The audience applauded politely when he finished. Next was a young woman who read a poem she'd written, followed by a duo who performed an acoustic version of a recent hit song. As the fourth performer took the stage, the middle-aged man playing harmonica, Eleanor felt her granddaughter's grip on her arm tighten. "I can't do this," the girl whispered, her face pale. "I think I'm going to be sick." Eleanor could see the genuine panic in her eyes. "Do you want to go outside for some air?" she asked gently. The girl nodded and they slipped out the side door into the small courtyard behind the cafe. In the fading evening light, Eleanor could see tears forming in her granddaughter's eyes. "I'm such a coward," the teenager said, wiping at her cheeks angrily. "I've been practicing for weeks and now I'm too scared to even try." Eleanor felt a familiar ache in her chest, the same one she'd felt decades ago when she'd given up her own dreams of performing. How different might her life have been if someone had encouraged her to push through the fear. "Being afraid doesn't make you a coward," Eleanor said firmly. "Everyone in there is nervous too, even if they don't show it." From inside, they heard applause and then the host announcing the next performer, her granddaughter's name. The girl looked at Eleanor with panic. "I can't go in there," she whispered. "Can we just go home, please?" Eleanor looked at her granddaughter's pleading eyes and made a decision. "Wait here," she said. "Take deep breaths. I'll be right back." Without giving herself time to reconsider, Eleanor walked back into the cafe and approached the young host. After a brief conversation, she made her way to the stage. The spotlight felt warm on her face as she adjusted the microphone. "Good evening," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "My granddaughter isn't feeling well, but she asked if I could play something in her place. If that's all right with everyone?" There were murmurs of assent from the audience. Eleanor glanced around and spotted a digital keyboard set up at the side of the stage. She walked over to it, her heart pounding in her chest. It had been years since she'd played for anyone other than family. Sitting at the keyboard, she closed her eyes for a moment, gathering her courage. Then, without further introduction, she began to play Golden Hour. Eleanor's fingers moved across the keys with a sureness that surprised even her. The first few notes of Golden Hour filled the small cafe, tentative at first, then growing in confidence. She had played this piece countless times in private, but never for an audience beyond her immediate family. The melody was simple yet haunting, a slow build of emotion that reflected the life she had lived with all its joys and sorrows. The chatter in the cafe gradually faded. Cups stopped clinking against saucers. Even the barista paused, coffee pot in hand, to listen. Eleanor kept her eyes on the keys, too nervous to look at the audience. She focused on the music, letting it flow through her the way it used to when she was young, and believed her compositions might someday be heard by more than just her bedroom walls. As she played the middle section, the part she'd written. After the birth of her son, she felt a familiar warmth spreading through her chest. This piece contained pieces of her soul, moments of her life translated into music. The crescendo near the end was Thomas, their love, their partnership, their quiet evenings by the fire. And the gentle resolution was the peace she'd been seeking since his passing. When the final note faded, Eleanor sat motionless, her hands hovering above the keys. The cafe remained silent. Had she played that badly? She finally looked up, blinking in the spotlight, and saw something she hadn't expected. People were staring, but not with boredom or pity. Many had tears in their eyes. A few had their hands pressed to their hearts. Then, as if someone had flipped a switch, the audience erupted in applause. It wasn't the polite, obligatory clapping that had followed the previous performers. This was enthusiastic, genuine. A young woman in the front stood up, followed by others. Eleanor felt her cheeks flush with heat. She hadn't received a standing ovation since her senior recital at music school, over 50 years ago. The young host bounded onto the stage, his eyes wide with surprise. Wow! Just wow! That was incredible. What's your name again, ma'am? Eleanor, she said softly into the microphone. Eleanor Jenkins. Ladies and gentlemen, Eleanor Jenkins, the host announced, and another round of applause filled the room. As she made her way off the stage, her legs feeling slightly unsteady, Eleanor noticed a young man holding up a phone. Had he been recording her? The thought made her uncomfortable, but she pushed it aside. She needed to check on her granddaughter. Eleanor found her waiting just inside the door, her face a mixture of awe and disbelief. Grandma, she whispered, throwing her arms around Eleanor. I didn't know you could play like that. I mean, I knew you taught piano, but that was different. Did you write that song? Eleanor nodded, still feeling dazed by the reaction to her performance. Years ago. I've written many pieces, actually. Why haven't you ever played them for anyone? The question hung in the air as they made their way back to their table. Several people stopped Eleanor to compliment her, including an older gentleman who asked if she gave lessons to adults. I'd love to learn to play like that, he said, handing her a business card. Call me if you're taking new students. By the time they sat down, 3 more people had approached her with similar requests. Eleanor's granddaughter was beaming. You're famous, Grandma, she said with a giggle. Hardly, Eleanor replied, though she couldn't help but feel a small thrill at the attention. It's just that most of these young people have never heard classical piano played live before. That wasn't just classical, though. It was... I don't know how to explain it. It made me feel things. The teenager looked at her grandmother with newfound respect. Why did you stop performing? Eleanor sipped the tea that a server had brought over. On the house, they'd insisted. How could she explain the choices she'd made so long ago? The practical decisions, the different priorities of her generation. Life happened, she said finally. I got married, had your father, started teaching to help with the bills. There wasn't time for performing. But you kept writing music? Yes, I couldn't stop that. Eleanor smiled, remembering the late nights at the kitchen table, scribbling notes on staff paper while the house was quiet. Music was always there, even when I wasn't on a stage. The rest of the open mic night continued, but Eleanor found it hard to focus on the other performers. Her mind kept returning to the feeling of being on stage again, of sharing her music with strangers and seeing it touch them. It had been exhilarating in a way she'd almost forgotten. The walk home was peaceful, the night air cool against her flushed skin. Her granddaughter chattered excitedly beside her, already making plans for Eleanor's comeback tour, as she jokingly called it. You should start a YouTube channel, the teenager suggested. People your age are getting famous online now. There's this grandmother who cooks traditional recipes that has millions of followers. Eleanor laughed. I think one performance is enough excitement for me. Thank you very much. But as she got ready for bed that night, Eleanor found herself humming another one of her compositions, a piece she'd written during a particularly difficult time after her mother passed away. She hadn't thought about that one in years. It was as if her music was reawakening inside her, stretching after a long slumber. The next morning, Eleanor went about her usual routine, though she felt slightly different, lighter somehow. She was watering her herbs when the phone rang. "Grandma!" Her granddaughter's voice was even more excited than usual. "You're trending." "I'm what?" Eleanor held the phone away from her ear as the teenager's volume increased. "Trending. On social media. Someone posted a video of you playing last night and it's everywhere. People love it." Eleanor sat down heavily at her kitchen table. "A video? But I didn't give anyone permission to." "That doesn't matter, Grandma. This is good. People are saying such nice things. They're calling you Piano Grandma and asking who you are and where they can hear more of your music." A strange feeling settled in Eleanor's stomach. Part anxiety, part something else she couldn't quite name. Privacy had always been important to her. The idea of strangers watching her, discussing her, felt invasive. Yet there was something else too. A small, quiet voice wondering, what if? "How many people have seen this video?" she asked cautiously. Well, the original post has about 50,000 views already, but it's been shared a bunch of times, so probably more than that by now." 50,000? Eleanor's voice came out as a whisper. The population of their entire town was only 12,000. "That can't be right. It's gone viral, Grandma. That happens sometimes. When something really touches people, it spreads fast." Eleanor thought about the piece she'd played, about all the emotion she'd poured into it over the years. Had it really connected with that many people? "What do they want?" she asked. "These people watching the video, they want to know more about you. They want to hear more of your music. Some people are asking if you have an album or something they can buy." An album. The word hung in the air like an impossible dream. Eleanor had imagined it once in her youth, seeing her name on a record cover, hearing her compositions played on the radio. But that had been a different time, a different Eleanor. "I need to think," she said finally. "This is a lot to take in." "Okay, but check your email. I sent you the link to the video and some of the comments. People are saying really beautiful things, Grandma." After hanging up, Eleanor sat at her kitchen table for a long time, staring out the window at her small garden. The herbs needed to be brought in soon. The first frost wouldn't be far off. Life had its seasons, its rhythms. Hers had been set for so long. Was it too late for a change? With a deep breath, she went to the old desktop computer in the corner of her living room. Thomas had insisted on getting it so they could video chat with their son and granddaughter when they lived overseas for 2 years. Eleanor rarely used it except for email and occasionally looking up recipes. She opened her inbox and found her granddaughter's message. With trembling fingers, she clicked on the link. There she was, sitting at the keyboard, her back straight as she'd always taught her students. The lighting made her look older than she felt. But as she began to play, something changed. The camera caught the moment when the music took over, when she forgot about the audience and lost herself in the notes. Eleanor watched, almost as if she were observing a stranger, as her face softened and her body swayed slightly with the rhythm of the piece. When the video ended, she scrolled down to the comments, bracing herself. Internet comments could be cruel. She'd heard enough stories from her granddaughter. But what she found instead brought tears to her eyes. "This made me call my grandmother for the first time in months. I've never seen someone put so much feeling into a piano piece. Does anyone know if she has other recordings? The way her hands move, you can tell she's been playing her whole life. What a gift to share this with us. I lost my husband last year and haven't felt much of anything since. This piece broke through somehow. I'm sitting here crying, but they're healing tears. Thank you, whoever you are." Eleanor wiped her eyes with the back of her hand. Her music had reached people. It had mattered to them, touched them in ways she couldn't have imagined. After all these years of playing privately, of keeping her compositions in folders unseen and unheard, they had found their way out into the world. The phone rang again, startling her. This time it wasn't her granddaughter. It was a number she didn't recognize. "Mrs. Jenkins?" said an unfamiliar voice when she answered. My name is Richard Bennett. I'm a producer with Harmony Records. I saw your performance online and I'd like to talk to you about your music. Eleanor's hand trembled as she held the phone. I think you have the wrong number, she said, certain this must be some kind of mistake or prank. No mistake, Mrs. Jenkins, the man replied. His voice was deep and confident. I'm with Harmony Records in Chicago. That performance you gave at the Copper Cup Cafe, it's extraordinary. The emotional depth, the composition itself, it's rare to find something so authentic these days. Eleanor sank into her chair, her knees suddenly weak. How did you find me? Social media moves fast, he explained. Someone tagged the cafe in the video and they confirmed your name. It wasn't hard to find your number from there. A small town where everyone knew everyone. A blessing and a curse, Eleanor thought. She wasn't sure what to say next. Mrs. Jenkins, I've been in this business for 30 years. I know talent when I hear it. Your composition deserves to be properly recorded, to be heard by more people. I'm 78 years old, Mr. Bennett, Eleanor said, feeling a need to remind him of this fact. I'm not exactly star material. His laugh was warm and genuine. Age is irrelevant when it comes to great music. Look at Pablo Casals. He was performing well into his 90s. Or Eubie Blake still playing piano at 98. Eleanor's thoughts raced. This wasn't something she had ever expected to happen. Not at this stage in her life. What exactly are you proposing? I'd like to meet with you to discuss recording your compositions. A proper album, professionally produced. Your piece, Golden Hour, is that what it's called? It's just the beginning. I suspect you have more where that came from. Eleanor thought of the folders in her piano bench stuffed with compositions she'd written over decades. Pieces that told the story of her life, her loves, her losses. Yes, she admitted. I have more. Perfect. I'll be in Ohio next week for another project. Could we meet then? No pressure, just a conversation. After she agreed to a meeting and hung up, Eleanor sat motionless at her kitchen table. The morning light streamed through the window, illuminating the dust particles floating in the air. The house felt different somehow, as if the walls were listening, waiting to see what she would do next. The sound of the mail slot clattering broke her trance. Eleanor rose and collected the usual assortment of bills, flyers, and a handwritten envelope. It was from her friend Harriet, who still preferred letters to emails. Settling back at the table, she opened Harriet's letter. After the usual pleasantries and updates, the final paragraph caught Eleanor's eye. I saw the most remarkable video online yesterday. You, playing that beautiful piece at the cafe. My granddaughter showed it to me. Eleanor Jenkins, why have you been hiding this talent all these years? The whole town is talking about it. I always knew you taught piano, but never realized you composed such moving music. You've been holding out on me, dear friend. Eleanor set the letter down. If Harriet had seen the video, then surely others in town had too. The thought made her stomach tighten. She wasn't used to being the center of attention. For most of her life, she had been in the background, supporting her husband's career, raising their son, teaching other people's children. Her music had been private, a personal joy rather than a public offering. The phone rang again. This time it was her son. Mom, have you seen the internet today? He asked without preamble. Your daughter already called to tell me about the video, Eleanor replied, trying to keep her voice steady. It's not just one video anymore. People are sharing it everywhere. A music blog just wrote about you. They're calling you the grandmother composer, and saying your piece captures the essence of life's fleeting moments better than musicians half your age. Eleanor closed her eyes. This was moving too fast. I just got a call from a record producer, she said quietly. What?
Mom, that's incredible.
What did they say? As Eleanor recounted her conversation with Richard Bennett, she could hear the excitement in her son's voice growing. You have to do this, Mom. It's an amazing opportunity. Dad would be over the moon about it. The mention of Thomas gave her pause. What would he have thought about all this? He had always been her biggest supporter, had always told her that her music deserved to be heard. Maybe, he would say, not now, but someday. Was this the someday he had imagined? I don't know, she said hesitantly. It's all happening so quickly, and I'm too old for this kind of attention. You're never too old to share your gifts, Mom. Never. After talking with her son, Eleanor felt restless. She went to the piano room and opened the bench, pulling out folders of yellowed sheet music. Some of the compositions dated back to her college days. Others were more recent, written in the quiet evenings after Thomas passed away. She had organized them chronologically, each piece a chapter in the story of her life. She selected one titled First Snow, written the winter her son was born. Setting it on the piano, she began to play, the gentle notes evoking the memory of standing at the nursery window, holding her newborn while watching snowflakes drift past the glass. As the final chord faded, Eleanor heard a knock at the front door. She wasn't expecting anyone. Smoothing her skirt, she went to answer it. On her porch stood a young woman with a notebook and a friendly smile. "Mrs. Jenkins? I'm Lisa Chen from the Pine Grove Gazette. I was hoping to talk to you about your viral piano performance." Eleanor's heart sank. The local paper? Of course they would be interested in this story. Nothing much happened in Pine Grove. She considered turning the reporter away, but something stopped her. Maybe it was Thomas's voice in her head telling her it was time to step out of the shadows. "Come in," she said, opening the door wider. "I can offer you some tea." They settled in the living room, and Eleanor found herself telling the stranger about her lifelong relationship with music. How she had studied piano performance in college, but set aside dreams of a professional career when she fell in love with Thomas. How teaching had been fulfilling in its own way. How composition had been her private joy, a way to process her experiences and emotions when words failed. "Why didn't you ever try to publish your compositions?" Lisa asked, scribbling notes. Eleanor considered the question. "It never seemed like the right time," she said finally. "When I was young, women weren't encouraged to pursue careers in composition. Later, I had a family to take care of. And then, I suppose I convinced myself that the moment had passed. But now?" Lisa prompted. "Now I'm being offered a chance I never thought I'd have." At 78. Eleanor shook her head, still amazed by the turn of events. "Are you going to take it?" That was the question, wasn't it? Eleanor looked around her living room, at the family photos on the mantel, the worn armchair where Thomas used to read, the simple life she had built. Change was frightening at any age, but especially now. "I don't know," she admitted. "Part of me wants to, but another part is terrified." Lisa smiled. "That's perfectly normal. Change is scary." After the reporter left, promising to share a draft of the article before publication, Eleanor called her granddaughter. "The local paper just interviewed me," she said, still not quite believing it herself. "That's awesome, Grandma. But wait until you see what's happening online now. Your video has over 1 million views." "1 million?" Eleanor repeated, the number incomprehensible. "People are making reaction videos to your performance. Musicians are talking about the composition technique. Someone even made a remix, though honestly the original is better." Eleanor felt dizzy. "This is too much." "No, Grandma, it's just right. Your music is touching people. Isn't that what art is supposed to do?" Out of the mouths of teenagers, Eleanor thought. There was wisdom in her granddaughter's words. That evening, Eleanor sat at her computer and read through more of the comments on the video. There were thousands now from people all over the world. Many shared how the music had made them feel, how it had taken them back to important moments in their own lives. Some asked for sheet music so they could play it themselves. Others wanted to know her story. Who was this elderly woman who played with such emotion? One comment in particular caught her eye. "My mother had dementia and rarely recognized me in her final years. But she was a pianist and music always reached her when words couldn't. I played this video for her today and she became alert, started moving her fingers as if playing along. For a few minutes she was present again. Thank you for this gift." Tears welled in Eleanor's eyes. Her private composition, written to process her own feelings about a day with Thomas, had somehow bridged the gap between a daughter and her mother with dementia. Her music had done that. The phone rang again. It was Richard Bennett. "Mrs. Jenkins, I hope I'm not calling too late. I've just seen the latest numbers on your video, and I couldn't wait until next week to talk to you again. This is remarkable. People are connecting with your music in a profound way. We need to move quickly on this opportunity." Eleanor took a deep breath. "Mr. Bennett, before we go any further, I need you to understand something. I'm not interested in fame or fortune at this point in my life. If, and that's still an if, I agree to record these compositions, it would be because I believe they might mean something to people who hear them." There was a pause on the other end of the line. Then Richard spoke, his voice softer than before. That's exactly why I called you, Mrs. Jenkins. What you've created isn't just commercially viable, it's meaningful. In my business, that's increasingly rare. I want to help share your gift with the world on your terms. Eleanor looked at the piano across the room, thinking of all the hours she had spent there, pouring her heart into compositions no one had heard. Maybe it was time for that to change. All right, Mr. Bennett, she said finally. Let's talk. The week passed in a blur of phone calls, emails, and more attention than Eleanor had experienced in her entire life. The article in the Pine Grove Gazette came out, taking up most of the front page with the headline, "Local Piano Teacher's Hidden Talent Captivates the World." The reporter, Lisa, had been kind in her portrayal, focusing on Eleanor's lifelong dedication to music, rather than the sensationalism of her sudden fame. But nothing could have prepared Eleanor for the morning Richard Bennett arrived at her door. He was younger than she'd expected, perhaps in his 50s, with salt and pepper hair and kind eyes that crinkled when he smiled. "Mrs. Jenkins," he said, extending his hand. "It's an honor to meet you in person." Eleanor invited him into her living room, acutely aware of the ordinariness of her home. The furniture was comfortable but worn. Family photos lined the mantel, and a vase of fresh-cut flowers from her garden sat on the coffee table. Nothing about the space suggested it belonged to someone who had become an internet sensation. "Would you like some coffee?" she offered, falling back on the hospitality she'd been raised with. "That would be lovely," Richard replied, setting his briefcase on the couch. As Eleanor busied herself in the kitchen, she tried to calm her nerves. She'd spent hours the night before sorting through her compositions, selecting the pieces that meant the most to her. They lay neatly stacked on the piano, a lifetime of emotion translated into notes and measures. When she returned with 2 mugs of coffee, Richard was examining the photos on her mantel. "Your family?" he asked, pointing to a recent picture of her son, daughter-in-law, and granddaughter. Eleanor nodded. "My son David, his wife Nancy, and their daughter Beth." She handed him his coffee. "They've been very excited about all of this. More excited than I am, if I'm being honest." Richard smiled, taking the mug. "That's understandable. This is a big change for you." He sat down in the armchair across from her. "I want you to know, Mrs. Jenkins, that I'm not here to pressure you into anything. My job is to help artists share their work with the world on their terms." "Please call me Eleanor," she said, feeling the formality slip away. There was something trustworthy about this man. "And I appreciate that, because I do have terms." Richard's eyebrows raised slightly, but he nodded for her to continue. "I want to record my compositions, but I don't want to travel extensively or do a lot of publicity. I'm 78 years old, Mr. Bennett. My life is here in Pine Grove." "Richard, please," he replied. "And I understand completely. We can set up recording sessions that work with your schedule and energy levels. As for publicity, much of it can be done remotely these days." Eleanor took a sip of her coffee, feeling some of her tension ease. "There's something else. These pieces," she gestured toward the piano, "they're very personal to me. I've never shared most of them with anyone. I want to make sure they're treated with care." Richard set down his mug. "May I see them?" Eleanor led him to the piano where her neatly written compositions sat waiting. Each one was dated, titled, and included small notes about what had inspired it, though she'd never expected anyone else to read those notes. Richard picked up the top sheet, a piece called Autumn Leaves that she'd written when David left for college. His eyes scanned the notes, his expression growing more interested as he read. "This modulation here," he said, pointing to a section in the middle. "It's unusual but perfect for the emotional shift." "You've had formal training," Eleanor nodded. "I studied music composition in college before I got married. It was uncommon for women back then, but my father supported it. He loved classical music." Richard continued looking through the pieces, occasionally humming a few bars to himself or asking questions about specific musical choices. His genuine interest and respect for her work made Eleanor feel more confident about her decision. "Would you play something for me?" he asked finally. "Maybe this one?" He held up a composition titled Winter Light. Eleanor sat at the piano, adjusting her posture out of habit. "I wrote this the first Christmas after my husband passed," she explained quietly. "The house felt so empty, but there was this moment when the sun came through the window at just the right angle, lighting up his favorite chair. It was like he was still with me in a way." She began to play, and the room filled with a melody that started softly, almost hesitantly, before building into something both melancholy and hopeful. The minor key gave way to major and unexpected places like sun breaking through clouds. When she finished, Richard was silent for a long moment. "Eleanor," he said finally, "this isn't just good music. This is healing music. People need to hear this." Over the next few hours, they discussed the details of recording an album. Richard explained how they could set up a temporary studio in her home for some of the work, minimizing the need for travel. They talked about which pieces to include, the order, and what the album might be called. "I'm thinking Late Bloomer," Eleanor suggested with a small smile. "It seems fitting," Richard laughed. "Perfect, and how do you feel about interviews?" "We'll get requests." Eleanor considered this. The idea of talking about herself to strangers was uncomfortable, but she understood it was part of the process. "I can handle a few, I suppose, but I'd rather talk about the music than about me." "Fair enough," Richard agreed. "We'll be selective." By the time he left, with copies of her compositions tucked safely in his briefcase, Eleanor felt a strange mix of exhaustion and exhilaration. She'd just taken a step that would change the rest of her life, however much of it was left. Her son called that evening. "Mom, we saw the article about you in the Chicago Tribune's arts section. They mentioned the record deal before you did." Eleanor sighed. News traveled fast in the digital age, faster than she could keep up with. "It's not officially a deal yet. We're still working out the details." "Well, we're thrilled for you. Nancy's already planning to help you set up social media accounts." "I don't need social media, David," Eleanor protested. "I barely use email." "Trust me, Mom, you'll want it. People are already creating fan pages for you. Wouldn't you rather have your own official page?" The conversation left Eleanor feeling overwhelmed again. Fan pages, for her, it seemed absurd. After hanging up, she retreated to the piano room. Without turning on the lights, she sat on the bench in the gathering dusk. This room had been her sanctuary for decades, the place where she processed her joys and sorrows through music. Now it would become part of a bigger story, one that included record producers, fans, and public attention. The thought was terrifying, and yet, there was another feeling underneath the fear. A sense that perhaps this was exactly where her path had been leading all along. The next few weeks passed in a whirlwind of activity. Richard sent a sound engineer to assess her piano and the acoustics of her home. They decided that her upright piano, while beloved, wasn't suitable for professional recording. Instead, they would record at a studio in Columbus that had a magnificent grand piano. "We'll send a car for you," Richard assured her. "Just 3 sessions to start, each no more than 4 hours. We can take breaks whenever you need." Eleanor's granddaughter helped her set up an official Facebook page, which gained thousands of followers within days. The comments continued to pour in, many from people sharing how her music had affected them. "My father is in hospice and we play your music for him. It brings him peace. I'm a piano teacher and your story has inspired my older students who thought they'd started too late. Your music helped me through my divorce. Thank you for sharing your gift with the world." Each message reinforced Eleanor's decision. Her private expressions of emotion were somehow universal, connecting with people in ways she could never have imagined. The day of the first recording session arrived. Eleanor woke early, her stomach fluttering with nerves. She chose her outfit carefully, a deep blue dress that Thomas had always loved, paired with the pearl necklace he had given her. After a lifetime of playing for herself, she would now play for the world. The car arrived precisely at 9. The driver, a polite young man, helped her into the back seat. "It's about an hour to Columbus, Mrs. Jenkins. There's water and snacks if you need them." As they pulled away from her house, Eleanor watched Pine Grove pass by the window. The library where she volunteered, the grocery store where everyone knew her name, the park where she'd taken her son and later her granddaughter to play. This small town had been her world for so long. Now her world was expanding, at an age when most people's worlds were contracting. The recording studio was housed in a renovated warehouse. Modern and sleek with exposed brick walls and large windows, it was unlike anywhere Eleanor had ever been. Richard met her at the entrance, his friendly face a welcome sight among the unfamiliar surroundings. "Ready for this?" he asked, offering his arm. Eleanor took a deep breath and nodded. "As ready as I'll ever be." He led her into the main studio space where a gleaming black grand piano sat in the center of the room. Microphones were positioned around it, and a glass wall separated the space from the control room where engineers sat with their equipment. "This is Antonio," Richard said, introducing a tall man with thoughtful eyes. "He'll be your producer for the sessions." Antonio shook her hand warmly. "It's a privilege, Mrs. Jenkins. I've been studying your compositions all week. The emotional range is remarkable." Eleanor felt herself blush at the praise. "Thank you. They're very personal pieces." "The best ones always are," Antonio replied. "Shall we start with Golden Hour, since that's the one people already know?" Eleanor settled at the piano, running her fingers lightly over the keys. The action was different from her upright at home. More responsive, the tone richer and more nuanced. She played a few scales to get the feel of it. "Whenever you're ready," Antonio's voice came through her headphones, "just like you're playing at home. Forget about the equipment." Eleanor closed her eyes for a moment, gathering herself. Then she began to play. The piece flowed from her fingers with the familiarity born of years of playing it in private. But this time, knowing it was being captured for others to hear, she found herself putting even more of herself into each note. The happy memories, the sorrows, the love, the loss, all of it poured through her hands and into the magnificent instrument. When she finished, there was silence in her headphones. Had something gone wrong? Then Antonio's voice, slightly choked with emotion. "I think we got it in one take." 6 months later, Eleanor sat in her living room surrounded by cardboard boxes. Each one contained copies of her album, Late Bloomer, with her photo on the cover. The image showed her at the grand piano, eyes half closed in concentration, her silver hair catching the light. She looked her age in the photo. Richard had insisted on that. No excessive retouching. But there was something timeless about her expression, a connection to the music that transcended years. "I still can't believe it," she murmured, running her fingers over the cover. After decades of writing music that no one heard, her compositions were now being shipped to stores across the country and available on all the digital platforms her granddaughter had explained to her. The doorbell rang, interrupting her thoughts. It was Lisa from the Pine Grove Gazette, right on time for their scheduled interview. "Eleanor, congratulations," Lisa said as she entered, her eyes widening at the boxes of albums. "May I?" she asked, picking up a copy. "Of course," Eleanor replied. "Take one if you'd like. I'd be honored. My mother has been playing your digital singles nonstop since they were released. She says your music reminds her of her own mother." They settled on the couch with tea, and Lisa pulled out her recorder. "So 6 months ago, you were an unknown piano teacher in Pine Grove. Today, you're releasing an album that's already getting rave reviews from critics. The New York Times called it a masterclass in emotional storytelling through music. How does that feel?" Eleanor took a moment to consider the question. "Surreal," she answered honestly. "At 78, you don't expect your life to take such a dramatic turn. I thought I knew who I was and what the rest of my life would look like. Now everything's different. Different in a good way?" Eleanor smiled. "Yes, though it's been an adjustment. The recording sessions were exhausting but exhilarating. Hearing my compositions played on that beautiful grand piano, with professional equipment capturing every nuance, it was like hearing them properly for the first time. And the response has been overwhelming," Lisa noted. "Your first single has over 10 million streams. People are using your music in videos, films, even therapy sessions. Did you ever imagine your private compositions would touch so many people?" "Never," Eleanor said, shaking her head. "These pieces were my way of processing my own life. The joys, the losses, the quiet everyday moments. To learn that they speak to others, that they help people through their own experiences. That's been the greatest gift of all this." The interview continued, covering her background, her creative process, and the experience of sudden fame at her age. When they finished, Lisa had one final question. What's next for Eleanor Jenkins? It was something Eleanor had been thinking about a lot lately. "The album release concert next month, of course," she replied, still nervous about the prospect of playing live in a proper concert hall. "After that, I've been talking with a music education foundation about a program to help older adults rediscover or continue their musical journeys. So many people have written to me saying they used to play an instrument but gave it up. I want them to know it's never too late." After Lisa left, Eleanor changed into comfortable clothes and drove to the community center on the edge of town. She'd started teaching a free piano class there for seniors. Nothing formal, just sharing her knowledge and encouraging people who thought their creative days were behind them. When she arrived, her 8 students were already waiting, chatting among themselves. They ranged in age from 65 to 92, some complete beginners, others returning to the piano after decades away. "Eleanor, we saw your interview in last month's RP magazine," called out George, a retired doctor who had always wanted to learn piano, but never had the time. "You're making us famous by association." Everyone laughed, and Eleanor felt that now familiar warmth of community. These weekly classes had become as important to her as her newfound career. "Today we're going to try something different," she announced, settling at the upright piano the center had recently purchased. "Instead of just practicing pieces, I want each of you to try composing something simple, just a few measures that express how you're feeling today." There were nervous looks around the room, but Eleanor smiled encouragingly. "That's how all my compositions started, just trying to capture a feeling. There's no right or wrong way to do it." As her students began experimenting with notes, some hesitantly, others with more confidence, Eleanor moved among them, offering gentle guidance. This was a different kind of fulfillment than hearing her music played on the radio or reading glowing reviews of her album. This was about passing along her love of music, about showing others that creativity didn't have an expiration date. That evening, her son and his family came for dinner to celebrate the album release. Beth, her granddaughter, arrived bubbling with excitement. "Grandma, you're trending again. The album hit #1 on the classical charts, and people are sharing all these stories about how your music helped them." Eleanor shook her head in amazement as she stirred the pasta sauce. "I never imagined any of this would happen when I agreed to play at that open mic night." "Sometimes the best things in life are the ones we don't plan," her son said, setting the table. There was pride in his voice that made Eleanor's heart swell. Over dinner, they discussed the upcoming concert, Eleanor's first major public performance. It would take place at a renowned venue in Chicago, with all proceeds going to music education programs for both youth and seniors. "Are you nervous?" her daughter-in-law asked. "Terrified," Eleanor admitted with a small laugh. "Playing in a studio is one thing. Playing in front of 1,000 people is quite another." "You'll be amazing," Beth assured her. "And I've been helping with the social media for the event. It's going to be live-streamed too, so people all over the world can watch." The thought made Eleanor's stomach flutter, but not entirely in a bad way. She was discovering that fear and excitement often felt remarkably similar. Later, after her family had gone home, Eleanor sat at her piano in the soft lamplight. So much had changed since that night at the Copper Cup Cafe. Her daily routines, her sense of purpose, even how people in town looked at her, with a newfound respect and curiosity. Yet some things remained constant. This piano, this room, the way music had always been her companion through life's ups and downs. Fame hadn't changed that core relationship, if anything. It had deepened it. She began to play a new piece she'd been working on, tentatively titled New Horizons. It had a different feel from her earlier compositions, more hopeful, more adventurous. The melody asked questions and found unexpected answers. It was the sound of a woman discovering that life could still surprise you, even in its later chapters. The day of the concert arrived with perfect autumn weather. Eleanor stood backstage at the Chicago Symphony Center, peeking through the curtain at the filling auditorium. Her family was in the front row, along with Richard and the team from Harmony Records. Many of her piano students had made the trip as well, chartered a bus together. 5 minutes. "Mrs. Jenkins," a stagehand informed her with a respectful nod. Eleanor smoothed her concert dress, midnight blue with subtle silver threading that caught the light. Around her neck was Thomas's pearl necklace, her connection to the past as she stepped into this unexpected future. Richard appeared at her side. "How are you feeling?" "Like I might float away," she admitted. "Or pass out." "Possibly both," he smiled warmly. "Just remember why you're doing this. It's not about the audience or the critics or the cameras. It's about the music. The same music you've been playing all your life." Eleanor nodded, taking a deep breath. He was right. The notes hadn't changed, only the number of people hearing them. "Oh, I almost forgot," Richard added, pulling an envelope from his pocket. "This came to the office for you. The woman who sent it was very insistent that you see it before the concert." Eleanor opened the envelope with curious fingers. Inside was a handwritten letter. "Dear Mrs. Jenkins, you don't know me, but my mother was the woman with dementia I mentioned in a comment on your video months ago. I wanted you to know that she passed away peacefully last week. During her final days when she recognized little else, your music still reached her. The nurses played your album on repeat, and it seemed to give her comfort when nothing else could. For that gift, I will be forever grateful. My mother was a pianist too, and I believe that somehow, your music spoke to her soul when words could no longer reach her. I'll be in the audience tonight, listening for both of us. With deepest gratitude, the letter was signed with a simple thank you. Eleanor carefully folded it and placed it in her pocket, close to her heart. Tears pricked at her eyes, but they were healing tears. The stagehand returned. "It's time, Mrs. Jenkins." Eleanor nodded, squaring her shoulders. As she walked toward the stage, she thought of all the paths that had led to this moment. The little girl practicing scales, the young woman setting aside her dreams for family, the widow playing alone in an empty house, the grandmother reluctantly stepping in at an open mic night. All of those women were part of her, their experiences layered like the notes of a complex chord. And now, at 78, she was adding a new layer to that composition. The applause washed over her as she stepped onto the stage. Eleanor smiled, first at her family in the front row, then at the full auditorium of strangers who had come to hear her music. As she settled at the grand piano and placed her fingers on the keys, she felt something she hadn't expected, a sense of coming home. She began to play.